Welcome to XYPN Radio, where your host Alan Moore brings you into a community of fee-only financial planners who want to profitably and successfully serve Gen X and Gen Y clients. If you're ready to get the knowledge you need from leaders in your field, learn from forward-thinking advisors, and take action on your own goals, XYPN Radio is the show for you. Here's your host.
Hello and welcome to this episode of XYPN Radio. I'm your host, Alan Moore, and today I'm excited to have Anna Sergunina, an XYPN member and owner of Main Street Financial, on the show today. Anna has an amazing story. Her family immigrated to the U.S. when she was in high school, and she didn't speak much English and had to learn in school. She ended up discovering financial planning in college before eventually ending up at Main Street Financial, a fee-only financial planning firm that primarily offered and still offers hourly services. She ended up buying the practice from Jim, the founder, and he's actually stayed on for 4 years now as an advisor at the firm, which is something I've never heard of before, but has been very successful for them. They now have 7 office locations, 7 team members, 3 of which are advisors, and she's just hired an operations manager to help take her firm to the next level. We talked about how they find clients, the number of plans they do each month, and their follow-up process, which is super important for an hourly practice, and more. Anna is the most successful hourly planner I'm aware of, so it was a pleasure to learn how she and Jim have built such a powerhouse operation. You can find any of the additional resources that we mentioned during the episode at xyplanningnetwork.com/115. Also, be sure to go to xyplanningnetwork.com/VIP to join our private group just for XYPN Radio listeners. It's a community of advisors we've all been looking for that's there to provide support when we need it the most. Best of all, it's free. I encourage you to check it out. Again, that's xyplanningnetwork.com/VIP. Without further ado, here's my interview with Anna. Hey, Anna, welcome to the show. Thanks so much for being on.
Hi, good to see you. I'm excited.
I am very excited. I have known you for... I'm trying to think, 4 or 5 years now. I think we met through NAPFA, but you have just had this amazing career path, which I'm very excited for people to hear about, not only sort of your path into owning your own firm, but also the way your firm is structured and everything, because it's just so unique, but so successful. So I guess just to sort of kick it off, could you give me just sort of a high-level overview of you and your firm, sort of where things stand today, and then we'll dig into some of the path that, sort of led us to this point.
Yeah, sure. So for the last 15 years, believe it or not, it's been that long, we have been practicing fee-only financial planning. But it's not just the fee-only financial planning, it's specific hourly practice, which over the time kind of evolved into doing more of a project work. We don't manage assets. We've never have and are not planning, at least at this point. So all the work that we do for clients are focused around planning, and obviously there's more, continuation after we put the initial plan, but investments are outsourced, insurance is outsourced, so everything is outsourced except that we build that relationship with clients through project work. So as of today, we have 6 offices across the country. We are registered in 7 different states, and all of our team is remote. Believe it or not, we kind of evolved over the years as we started in Maryland, DC area. And I can talk more about, how everything is structured and how we work in just a bit.
Absolutely. How many team members do you have at this point?
So there's 7 of us. We have 3 advisors. We have 2 paraplanners. We have an admin person. And then we just hired an operations manager.
That's a huge step. That's going to be your favorite hire. No offense to your other 6 team members, but that's going to be the hire that changes your life.
Yes, I'm going through the transition right now. So yes, I'll share some more of that, because this was definitely, I think, the biggest decision I've made, other than buying the practice, now buying it and turning it over for somebody to manage it. We also, utilize consultants such as, for marketing, for the website design. So there's probably half a dozen of other people that we work closely with. So I view our team as, more than just the 7 full-time employees that are spread out across the country.
So I suspect y'all are one of, if not the largest hourly practice that I've ever encountered. And I definitely want to talk about how that has sort of evolved. But give me just sort of a quick background on you and how did you become a financial planner?
Yes. So I'm going to start from the beginning. I wish I knew it then, but where I come from, financial planning is not a career. It doesn't exist today. So Well, let me start from the beginning. So my family immigrated in the 90s to the United States and all settled in the Maryland area because my dad had a friend, and that's what you do when you move and you settle in a new place. So I was 15 and I didn't speak much English, right? I've learned English in school, but just like if you remember learning Spanish, or maybe you did do well and you know how to speak.
No,
but
not well at all. And English is about 10 times harder to learn than Spanish.
So I didn't speak much English, but I didn't have a choice, right? I had to go to English school. I was already in high school, so in the college it was in the horizon. So I had to, figure out how to get around and how to start speaking. So I got a job at the mall, that's because first of all, wanted to make some money. That was my idea. And then I wanted to learn how to speak English. So fast forward into when I started college, I actually did not plan to be a financial planner. This has all kind of happened later on. My idea was that I wanted to be a doctor, like from the very early age. I wanted to be a doctor. That seemed like a good career for a woman. And so I took a lot of biology classes, chemistry classes in high school, and that was my major when I started college. But at the end of the sophomore year, I somewhat decided that I just didn't feel like I wanted to be in school for the next 10 years, right? So I went around looking and I heard about business school, right? And then they had all kinds of different majors, and there was business, there was finance, marketing, accounting. So I went for finance. And then when I graduated with finance degree, I still didn't know what to do with it, right? Where could I work? What could I do with the corporate sort of finance degree that I had? And then I learned about the CFP program. At the time, I had an internship at Smith Barney, but Smith Barney is not a financial planning firm. No, I had to have an internship in order to graduate. It was one of the requirements in one of the classes I was taking. And so that gave me a good start in understanding that I didn't want to be a stockbroker. That was not how I wanted to start my career. And so learning about the CFP and having a bit of a background starting in the investments world kind of solidified the idea that I actually wanted to do financial planning. And I started looking around, kind of doing online search. And this was 2004, 2005, right? So there was not a whole lot of financial planning concept as it exists today back then. I did find NAPFA, and I did find Garrett Planning Network, because there were sort of newer network that was started at a time to support this fee-only planning hourly concept. And that just took me a little bit of time, but then I finally found a firm, and this is our current firm, Main Street Financial Planning. And I reached out to Jim and I said, look, I'm interested in what you have to offer. And he had an ad, I think it was in an FPA board or something, looking for part-time help. And I said, I cannot work part-time. I need a full-time job, and this is what I want to do. And so basically, he just had no choice to offer me a job, right? So I started as, at the very bottom. I still was taking CFP courses. I didn't have a whole lot of industry experience. And I said, okay, I'm willing to do all the dirty work right now. I'll do the admin, I'll do the paraplanning work until I get my CFP and get experience, and I can start seeing clients. So that was 2006. So I started in 2006 and just had 11-year anniversary. And I can't believe it's been that long.
Wow. Congratulations. 11 years.
I know, right?
And I'm a big fan of confirmation bias and being able to prove myself right. So your comment about, just saying like, look, I need a full-time job. I frequently tell young planners that most advisors in this industry can hire you. They just don't know they need you necessarily, but they have the money for the most part. Like if they're in the first couple of years, maybe not. But once an advisor's been in business 5, 6, 7 years, they have the money to hire you. They may not realize they need a full-time person. They may not recognize, what you bring to the table, but you find the right one, they can hire you. And so it's one of the hard things in our industry is that, it sort of follows the, I think, overall averages for hiring, which is that something like 25% of jobs are actually posted somewhere. The other 75% are just for meeting people. And so you've just got to do the legwork. And you're, fortunately he had posted in, on the FPA boards, but you just got to go to events. You just got to go meet people, because you never know who could hire you or who's thinking about hiring and just hasn't posted anything yet. So don't wait on the job ad is my point. It doesn't work 11 years ago and it doesn't work today to just sit around and wait. But it also goes to show your scrappiness, which is huge in being successful as a financial planner and as an entrepreneur, which you now are.
Yes. And it was interesting. I wanted to point this out too. So Jim he started the company in 2002. So he was 4 years into his practice, right? And that's about the time that you start sort of seeing that you just can't do this yourself anymore. You need help. And so you're at that point where how I felt earlier this year, I think it kind of accumulated all, but that was sort of the setting point for me is, okay, I can't do this anymore. I need to hire an operations person. I don't need an assistant. I need somebody to actually run the company. So that was the tip. And then I'm 4 years into the ownership of the business. So I think there's definitely a cycle that happens.
Yeah. So talk to me about the ownership, because you've been there 11 years, owner for 4 years. So I guess Jim's older, quite a bit older than you are. So was he planning? But he didn't start until 2002. So he obviously wasn't planning on retiring, immediately. So how did that conversation start between the two of you? And sort of what has that ownership transition look like between the two of you?
Yeah. So once I got my CFP, I started seeing clients on my own, and we've expanded into more markets. We opened up a DC office, and it's something to point out is that majority of our leads do still come from us having the locations, even though our practice is all virtual and remote. We do a lot of, work that way, but our clients are still finding us by Googling and looking for somebody in their zip code, or going to the NAPFA and plugging in their zip code. So having these locations worked really well back then. It still does today. So we've expanded by then. It was 2009 when we started sort of growing and got another location in New York. By 2011, my husband and I decided that we wanted to move to California, and I sort of kind of got a first taste of what it was like to work remotely, because everything was on the East Coast. And then we moved into the San Francisco Bay Area, having no contacts, right? Not knowing anybody. So by then, we've already had conversations along the way with Jim, not about succession planning, but he would always talk about the fact that, and I think it was driven primarily by the fact that clients were asking a question. As you pointed out, he was a little bit older, and they were wondering, well, how much longer are you going to be doing this, right? And so he would reply, say, well, if I'm not here, Anna will take care of you, right? And it sort of kind of evolved over the years that, okay, well, I guess I could take care of it, but I don't have to, right? We never sort of had a formal agreement until a certain point where we did formalize it. We put a buy-sell agreement in place, and we actually even funded it by life insurance, because we really wanted to have, a real plan, not just a conversation saying, well, Anna will take care of it, when I was across the country, right? Trying to set up a location here, open an office, and grow the practice. So it kind of started as an innocent kind of conversation, and then it transitioned into, okay, we have something in place. And so after I've moved and got a taste for myself, what it's like to start from scratch, not know anybody, go out and start networking, knocking on the doors, right? I've had so much coffee that I can't even remember how many coffee meetings can you have? But that was, and because of our business model being so unique, I was sort of a complement to even other advisory practices, because they didn't want to deal with the small guys, right? They didn't want to deal with people who didn't have enough assets. And I was like, that's fine. I'll work with those clients, because the number of, amount of assets doesn't matter. Let me work with them on the hourly or project basis. So I've had a lot of success in establishing this office here while still traveling back to the East Coast. And I still do that for the last 6 years. I've been on the road almost every 4 to 5 weeks back to the Maryland, DC area, seeing clients. So I would, for example, this week I'm going on Thursday. So I would pack all my appointments in 3 or 4 days I'm there. And I will just go appointment by appointment by appointment, see all the clients I need to see. Luckily, I have family, so it makes it a bit easier, but it still, takes a good chunk out of my schedule. So a little bit into being on my own as I viewed it. And imagine the kind of shock Jim had when I announced that I was moving, right? We sort of were kind of, working on some sort of succession plan. And it's been 5 years, and, all of a sudden, I'm trying to run away. And so once I sort of saw what it was like and I knew I could do it, if I could do it in one location, right? Like I could do it in multiple locations. So it really happened without any planning. And I remember coming back from a conference and somehow I had a conference. I guess it was in the middle of the week. And then I was traveling to the East Coast. And I remember Jim picked me up at the airport. And this was 2013. And I don't know if you recall, I think this is when we were together on NAPFA committee for the Genesis. And there was a lot of discussion about succession planning. Oh my gosh, this was like I think it still is, but it's like the buzz word everywhere. And so I think I've heard enough of it. And so Jim picked me up and we're driving to the office and I said, so you mentioned to me that you want to sell the business at some point. And he says, yes. And I replied to him and said, I'm ready to buy. And that was it. So we hired an attorney, to make everything formal. We made our arrangements and everything. And this was less than 6 months. 4 months later, beginning of 2014, 100% of the business was mine.
Oh, so you bought it immediately. This was not a phased transition. This was
it was all of the business, but I'm still paying for it, right? We had a structure of how I can pay for it. And I wanted him, I know he's going to listen to this, but I'm going to say it. I wanted him to be around and he wasn't going anywhere, right? It was just more of, he wanted to focus more on clients. I was excited into, starting this new career path of being a business owner. And so it just naturally worked out. It was 100% purchase right away.
Good for Jim. This is an area where listeners have heard me harp on this a little bit, but it's as much about being a rock star, younger planner that's ready to step into the role of ownership. It's as much about that as it is an even bigger portion, I guess, is having an owner or a founder that's willing to step out. And it is so hard to do that. It is so hard to walk away from your baby, which is your business. But ultimately, that's, that it's necessary for the long-term, success of the company. So kudos to Jim and kudos to you for being able to make this plan work, because a lot of advisors aren't able to get to this point.
Yes. No, I think if you decide on anything in life, if you think about it, if you made a decision, just go with it, right? It could be a wrong decision, but if you sort of ponder and sit on it and never act, it's not going to get you anywhere. So, obviously we gave it some thought of how the whole transition was going to happen and the details of it, but for just simplicity of the whole transaction, it was just easier for us to do it that way. And then he can start focusing on just doing the client work, right? And then I've got a whole other job.
So he stayed on as an advisor and is still financial planner for those clients?
Oh, yes. So it's going to be 4 years at the end of this year that we made the transition. And so he completely stopped being involved in the business decisions and operations. And so he's just primarily facing the clients that we've accumulated over the years and the new clients that still come through our doors today. So I have to come up with a new idea how to give them some ways to stay, right? I do have an idea though. We were chatting a little bit about some of the travel before, but so Jim, somewhat semi-retirement plan, he's dreamed about this for years, but he wanted to live in Italy for a couple of months or a year. And so he actually finally got to do it this year. He just got back beginning of July. And for the 3 months that he was in Italy, he actually got to work remotely. So I thought that if I could let him do that,
then he can work from anywhere.
I know, right?
So hopefully Jim is listening to this, and this is Anna's way of letting you know you have new duties. That is an amazing transition. I have never heard of an advisor selling their practice and staying on as a planner for 4 years. I mean, it's one thing to sell to private equity and keep running the company or hire a CEO so you can focus on the planning, but to sell your firm to your associate advisor and let them step in as the business owner is a huge accomplishment. Like I said, I have never heard of that before. I'm a little bit in shock. I didn't realize that was how that transition happened for y'all.
Yes, it was definitely a big transition as far as what I had to do. But yeah,
So, how much fun is it running a business?
Oh gosh, I wish that day when we signed the paperwork that somebody actually just handed me some kind of a manual, operations manual, whatever you want to call it, but step-by-step instructions of what to do. I mean, maybe no Jim was there all the time. It's not like, he just handed me the keys and said, go do it. No, but there's a lot more than that. And I think it had to do more with understanding where I was in my career, right? Being a financial planner is one job, and I love that job. And I think I could do this forever. But being a business owner is a whole other hat you have to wear. And so it took me a bit of time to realize it, right? First, it was like, oh my gosh, I'm a business owner. Wow, But as things started to settle and decisions came on, my plate, and I had to make changes or adjustments or take steps, that's when it started finally to kick in and say, okay, what am I supposed to be doing, right? What direction am I supposed to be taking this company, right? Because I had a vision, right? Because I wanted to, because I love the idea of the planning that we do, and the business model is still unique and a lot more people need help. So in getting experience in opening just one location and seeing how successful I was, that was the whole idea behind buying the business, right, from Jim. Can we grow it? If I can do it, more people can do it. And if I can provide a platform with Main Street, right, for other advisors, then all they have to do is just what they actually are meant to do, which is be advisors. So with all of that, and when you come I looked at this transition as having a practice. When I bought it from Jim, I looked at it as being a practice, right? Because it was 2 advisors. We had an assistant. We had a paraplanner at that point. But it was still small enough business. But in my mind, I wanted it to be the real business, right? A business that could run without me being present. And so it did take me 3 years to get to that point where I finally said, I can't do it myself. I need to have an operations manager, right? And so that this business does not depend on me being there 100%. Could be run without me. Decisions could be made. Clients could be seen. And it's not just Jim and Anna, right, who are part of Main Street, but it's others who believe in what we do.
And that's sort of when you transition from being a practice to being a business. And it's when you are able to step out of the just true day-to-day and being necessary 24/7. And the business will still survive without you. If you take a week off, the wheels keep turning. They don't just grind to a halt.
No, exactly. And that's the biggest, I think, lesson I've learned in this transition is that, and I knew this from the day one, that I did not want to have a practice because I did not want it to depend on me. But it took a bit of time to actually work on myself, right? Understanding what my strengths and weaknesses are, because as you sort of it was hard for Jim, I'm sure it was, to transition, to sell the practice and sort of hand everything over to me. It is just as equally as hard for me at this transition that I'm going through with the operations manager I have in place, Ryan, is sort of, handing over the whole, keys to my kingdom per se, right? So it does require a lot of character work, right? Because it's like I can't have my finger on the push button all the time.
So talk to me a little bit about the structure of the firm, because you mentioned doing a lot of hourly work. So is the bulk of your work sort of project based, done, sort of calculated based on an hourly rate? Is that the primary service model at this point?
It is, right. So we definitely still the hourly. Or we have an hourly rate that we use to come up with a project fee. So that's kind of how our business model has been all these years. About, I think in middle of 2014, and in certain cases, it's actually an attractive model when the client sits across the table from you. They like the idea. They want to see what you're going to do for them. And here's the breakdown of the hours. But I found that it was a little bit more difficult when you sort of sit there and you start to add up your hours and they're like, oh my gosh, so well, you can take this out, you can take this out, right? Like they're trying to tell you like, well, I could take out the investment review, right, for you, but what are we going to do about that? Or insurance review. So some things just like it just didn't make sense. If we're offering comprehensive planning, why do I have to exclude all these things? So what we did is we used our hourly rate, looked at historical sales, how much time we were spending on these plans, and we came up with projects packages, as we call them. And so based on where the clients are in their life, for example, a younger family starting out, right? Or a single person just getting out of college. So really depending on that, or a family having kids, right? Or families who are getting closer to retirement. So each of those different life phases require maybe different topics that we talk about and the amount of time that we spend, right, in creating their plans. And so we came up with somewhat, standard plans. And then if there's more work that, for example, they have more real estate or investments are complicated, then we can add more additional hours. So if you go to our website, we actually outlined it exactly that way. And it's sort of just a little bit of a different sales approach. And it became much easier for prospects when they're coming to our website to see, which box do I kind of fit in, right? Oh, I have kids and, I need to worry about that. And this is sort of the plan for me. And here's what you're going to get. Because in the past, there was more of, well, how much is this going to cost me? Working it backwards. But other than that, our process is still the same, right? We still follow the same structure of how we deliver plans and how many meetings we have and everything.
Listeners can go to mainstreetplanning.com. We'll also link to it in the show notes if you want to go see sort of how that's packaged, because it's very interesting, and it's all about, human psychology, but how, the same service model can be packaged or sold in a couple of different ways, and just how much more effective it can be, one, from just signing clients up, but then two, sort of the long-term relationship that we have with our clients is very much dictated by the way that we package the same services, because we sort of all provide a similar service model. We just talk about it very differently.
I wanted to point out something. So when they visit the mainstreetplanning.com site, because we are so process oriented and driven. So from the very first time somebody reaches out to us to when we have the first call or the first meeting, if you note on our website, we actually still charge $100 up front before we meet with anybody. It's more of a commitment. It's not $100 that I want to make, but I want to make sure that when the prospect shows up, they're for real. They're just not going to sit around and ask questions. And sure, I'll give you free advice, but we need to be working on, real stuff. So we have very specific steps, and you'll see there's a chart there that lists all the different steps in the process that we follow. It's really easy to explain to somebody when they call us, right? Or when the client shows up. And I have a brochure that Sean Tadalski mentioned to you on his podcast that I present to all the prospects. Even, when I go out to coffee appointments or networking, this is clearly explaining how we do it and what we do. But, it does help the whole sort of process go faster. It's clear in client's mind, and they know anytime in these steps where we are and what are we working on.
So just to emphasize that, what you're saying is you actually charge $100 in order for a prospective client to schedule an intro meeting with you. This is not to start the planning process. This is to just sit down with you. You charge them $100 to be sure that they are serious about it.
It's not a charge. We refer to it as a deposit. And yes, they need to pay that up front, and they need to fill out a questionnaire, which is all on our website. And once we have a first meeting, it could be a remote meeting or in person, and then we agree on what are the packages they're going to go with, or if it's going to be just a shorter project or maybe a, hourly type of engagement, we will include that $100 in the overall project fee. If they decide that they don't want to work with us, $100 stays.
Okay, so it's non-refundable. There are not a lot of firms out there that do that. And it's not, I don't think it's intended to be, again, it's not a revenue line item really. It's not making a huge difference on the bottom line, but it probably helps with the prospective client meeting and being sure those folks are really bought in, to actually being there and wanting to start the financial planning process.
Yes. And a lot of, maybe, once every 10 or so prospects will say, well, I really want to talk to you on the phone and just want to make sure before I pay $100 fee. And most of the times you just talk to them and it all gets resolved, right? Because they want to know you're for real. Like somebody, over the weekend, I got an email from somebody who said, can you please forward me your bio? And I'm thinking to myself, okay, I wanted to respond to her and say, can you just Google my name? I haven't.
Website.
I know, right? So I'm going to be nice about it. But, so there's definitely, we know this is such a sensitive area that we, and clients come here and they open up everything. So I can understand why it could be a bit intimidating. And so they want to make sure that we're for real.
So you have 7 people at an hourly based practice, which most hourly based practices are just sort of solo advisors. We don't see a lot growing beyond that. So how many clients are you on sort of an initial basis and then an ongoing check-in basis are you working with on an annual basis to support a company of this size?
So each of our advisors, we have sales goals that we have to meet, both for new clients for whom we do initial plans, and then obviously recurring clients. So we have 6 to 8 new plans. That's the target for each advisor per month. So we each have to have that many new plans that we sign for, right? You can have a lot more initial meetings, but at the end of the month, that's the goal. For recurring clients, so it's primarily just Jim and I who have the most recurring clients because we've been there longer. So we service this year 115 recurring clients, and we have 3 different levels of how they access our service. Some are quarterly, coming back every quarter. Some are twice a year, and some are sort of kind of, every however many years we call them pop-up clients.
Okay, just sort of randomly show up.
Exactly.
So for one of your full-time advisors, the expectation is 6 to 8 actual plans done. And I was looking at your website, somewhere in that sort of $3,000, price point. It can go up a little bit from there. So the expectation is 6 to 8 initial plans a month. So that's 72 to 100, basically 96. So 72 to 96 plans a year. That I know some advisors that aren't doing 12 a year. Where are these clients coming from? I mean, what's sort of the marketing machine powering that level? Because you have 4 advisors now, so that's 350, 400 plans a year.
3, yes, we have 3 advisors. So remember, we have 6 different offices. So the marketing machine, if you want to call it, it's very simple. Really, it's clients finding us online, and that could be either through NAPFA, through Garrett, right? XY. So, all of those networks are being referral sources. And then a lot of personal connections, right? With centers of influence. That's why having coffee meetings is really important. Networking with other professionals, other advisors who don't do planning, and maybe they do comprehensive planning and asset management, and they still don't have, the clients don't fit their business model, don't have enough assets. They send them our way. So primarily, all of our business is referral based. And then clients themselves, because we've been doing this for 15 years. So you think that over 15 years, we've accumulated quite a bit of clients that would come back for plans themselves, and they would send their friends, family members, and whatnot. But we don't pay for any advertising. So it's really organic growth and how clients come to us. We do participate in all of social media, and we write, we have podcasts. All of this stuff is obviously done, but it's very simple and straightforward channels how we get our clients.
Yeah, that's pretty impressive. I'm not sure that I'm aware of any firm that has that level of just overall lead flow. It's just an impressive number of new clients that are coming in, and even with the referral base and all of that, that y'all are just absolutely killing it. So, all right. So you have you said 150 ongoing clients, and they can be broken up into quarterly, semi-annually, and then annually. So or pop-up, I'm sorry, not annually. Are you seeing more and more clients sort of coming back for services? Or I guess maybe what's the breakdown or percentage of clients between those 3 versions, or sort of those 3 tiers? And are you seeing that increase over time as y'all do more plans and work with more clients?
We are, and it really had to do a lot with how our business model was presented and still being presented to the public. I think in us shifting the idea that, yes, we do hourly work, but it's really more of the project. Here's here's the package that you're going to get. It's a year worth of services, right? If you're initial client. It's a bit of different sales process that we started to introduce just recently, right? Than we did in the past, more of, okay, here's an hourly plan, and clients kind of from the get-go understood that's it, right? Because they knew they were paying us an hourly rate. Once we shifted that and said, okay, it's a plan, it's worth 1 year worth of services, then we come back and review in year 2, then it started to open up a little bit more doors for clients to see, okay, well, I have a way that I can come back. And we have a pretty intense sales process of, okay, so what happens at the 12 months mark, right? How do you get back with the client? Because we slowly incorporating the retainer model, right? But still, because there's a big base of clients who we've done plans for, we have over 1,200 households in our database over the years, right? And so all of those are clients for whom we could do plans, but it doesn't mean that they're ready to sign up for, a retainer model, but they could come back for a review. I had a client, I remember when I started, it was, I think, 2007, and we did their initial plan. They came back 9 years later. 9 years later, but you know what's like from one angle, I kind of feel guilty about the fact that, why haven't we done a better job at getting them on board? But we contact all of our clients twice a year. I pick up the phone and I dial, 1,200 clients if I can. If I can't, Jim will do that, right? Because you've got to stay engaged. So it really depends for, where somebody is. But that particular client had to retire. So they actually had to come back and see us. The conversion rate, and it's hard to say, but if I had to, we did do some numbers with help of Brian, of course, because operations managers think that way. And he was asking me these questions like, I don't know. I know people come back and this is the numbers, but about 25% will renew for, if you look at the initial year, and they would renew for the next year. And then you have all of those clients from previous year would renew as well. So twice a year, we just finished running our sort of mid of the year promotion of contacting all of the clients that didn't sign up in December for any services. So we usually do it twice a year. So we've contacted everybody, said, how are you doing? What's going on? Let's update your plan. It's been 5 years or whatnot. And not everybody goes for it, right? Obviously, but some people are like, yes, I'm glad you called me. This is definitely, I've been meaning to do that. It's just a bit of a different renewal process as opposed to having a retainer model, and from day one, they know they're paying you a fee. But we've been successful at it.
That was going to be one of my questions, was just how are you managing the outreach process? Because I've heard of some advisors that'll do, annual postcards, sort of like the dentist, where it's like every 6 months you get a postcard to schedule your meeting and that sort of thing. But you're actually calling your database of clients and asking them to sign up instead of just, email or a quick letter in the mail.
We do everything for sure. Most of the time, the postcard will work, right? They will respond. So we do a postcard first, and then we do a series of emails, right? Actually, Jim and I have done videos in the past. So just do a little Google Hangout, record a video and saying, here's why you need to come back and review your finances. And then the best sales tool is actually picking up the phone and calling your client. They're your clients, right? It's not a cold call. They're thrilled to hear from you. My advisor is calling me. Yes, I want to say hi.
It's a nice surprise touch point for sure.
It is for sure. And so, right. And it could be that right at that point, they don't have questions and don't need anything, but it could be that they're ready to talk to you again. I think this is a unique sort of a process, particular for our business model. It's a little bit different in the retainer space, but I'm sure that you can utilize the same process if you just pick up the phone. And for the longest time, I was afraid of that. I don't know what I was afraid of, maybe rejection or something. But then I was finally realized that, what's the worst that could happen? If they say no, okay, it's no. It's not no forever. It's not today.
Right. And it would have been no. It would have been a no if you hadn't called.
Exactly. Once I realized that and I saw how much success we had, I was like, oh my gosh. Why?
And it's crazy because those are the types of things that like you logically know. Like if I ask, if I walk you through the process of why aren't you calling? Well, I don't want to get a no. Well, it's a no anyway. Like, we can say that and it sounds so obvious, but when you're in that moment and like you're trying to pick up the phone, and I know I hate just like randomly calling people. That is the worst, because a no feels worse than just not calling and it being a no, right? It just feels worse to be told no, but it is so important. It is amazing the difference it makes to just pick up the phone and just have that conversation.
Yes, it's not just clients, it's anything. I mean, being a business owner, you're going to have to face those fears. And so I think that's the biggest lesson for me too, is the sooner I faced them, the better things became, right? And the more revenue there was just simply by calling somebody. So I don't have a problem with calls. Okay, sure. Give me a list of numbers. I'll be dialing all day. No, not a problem.
Especially with operations now, which I want to talk about here in a minute, but tracking that data, which on our last episode, we actually talked with Sean Talatsky again, and he talked about his data tracking metrics. And this is the type of data that you want to track to say, I made 12 phone calls and got 4 yeses or 6 yeses. So over the course of the year, I made, 150 or 200 phone calls, and that turned into $180,000 in revenue. Like, you can do that math. But, if I just ask you, like, is it successful? You're going to go like, oh, well, yeah, I mean, it's working. I'm like, but do you have the data to back that and to say, no, this really is successful? Like, this is our number. At this point, it's the number one marketing method, is to just reach out to our previous clients. And then you know where to allocate resources, because you making those phone calls is very valuable time, because it's a lot of phone calls to make. You could be doing other things, but you're able to see, hey, no, that is the most effective use of my time, is just picking up the phone.
Correct. And one of the things I also observed that most of the times, and I try this at different times of the day, calling, later in the evening, because I could do that right with the East Coast, West Coast time zones. It's interesting that sometimes I would just leave messages and then clients would respond by email.
Hey, please stop calling me. I'm that guy. I hate voicemails. Are I don't know why. I hate listening to voicemails, and I hate responding to phone calls. So I would be that guy that like emailed you back.
That is fine. Actually, email probably works even better, because then I can, phone call, we can just chat, but with the email, I can engage you a little bit more, right? Because there's more sort of, the door is open a little bit wider than just a phone call. Some clients text message back. So it's kind of all over the map. But the idea is that the more touches you have, I am sure that it's going to produce more results. Your clients are going to be happier, right? Who doesn't want to hear from their advisor?
Because they spend a lot of money with us. I mean, we command a very good price point, as we should. But it is nice when I'm going through the estate planning process right now, as I'm getting married here in October. I'm spending a lot of money on a estate attorney. And it's so different. I've recommended to, tons of clients to go get an estate plan. And this is the first time I've actually gone through the process. And, now I understand the pain and why people don't do it, just because it's expensive. And it's so much fun to talk about your death. But it is nice when, you get random messages or random outreach and that personal touch, because you're like, you know what, I am spending a bunch of money.
No, I value that's the most. And I would, anyone who would provide the same level of service to me would definitely be right on the top of my list. It's only, it's only fair to those who you work with.
Agreed. So you have, remind me, 7 offices and 3 advisors. I mean, you have more offices than advisors. So talk to me about the the office structure, and I guess where the advisors work out of, and how you're managing the multiple locations, and sort of, I guess, what that means for your firm.
Our locations are Maryland. We have an office close to BWI Airport. We have an office in Washington, D.C. We have an office in New York, in Manhattan. We have Santa Barbara. I have an office here in Burlingame, where I'm primarily most of the time. And then I just recently opened a San Jose location, because there were a few advisors who retired. So I saw an opportunity in that market. So our offices, except for my full-time office, everything is shared space. So there's virtual locations, which don't cost a ton of money. It really, again, is right, because our clients come from finding us based on their zip code or local searches. So having those offices help with that, but it doesn't mean that we have to be there full time, right? I only go to those offices, or other advisors do, when we need to meet with clients. I don't really work well from home, so I kind of have to have an office I need to go to, so I have a structure to my day. But that's just kind of how it worked out that I was able to find an office that's close to my home. Everybody else works remotely, and Jim is on the road a lot. So it's not, it's not a big deal where he's at as long as the client can get a hold of us. So the offices are really just for using to meet with clients. And we're seeing a lot more of clients are interested in doing online work because they don't want to drive for an hour to see us in the office, right? They are totally fine doing it over Skype or some other video channel, sitting in their living room. So that's kind of the location, the locations and logistics of our advisors. So I live in San Francisco Bay Area. And so I cover the California, right? West Coast. But then as I was mentioning before, I fly back to Maryland once a month for about 4 to 5 business days. And I stay there and I try to group all my appointments, those people who want to see me in person. So I see everybody in person between Maryland and DC office. I don't go to New York as much anymore. That's Jim's territory. So he would do actually the same. So, and we have an advisor in the Maryland, DC area as well. That is the Maryland, DC area in Virginia as well, registered in Virginia. That's the biggest chunk of our business because we've been there the longest. So it's sort of a bit uneven as far as how our clients are spread out. And they're not just in those locations, they're all over the country. Actually, we have clients that don't even live in this country. They live abroad. And they're still, right? I mean, all over, if I had to look on the map. So it's just where the flow referrals is coming from. And I've worked a lot in this area to establish myself, right? To get known. And the same thing, in other locations. Like we don't have anybody in New York full time. So that's kind of the location that needs to be, it really just needs to be worked on more.
Right. So how do you handle scheduling? I mean, the scheduling complexity here is just intense, right? So do you have a system for managing all this, or have you just sort of figured out how to handle it manually?
No, first of all, we have an admin person who's in charge of just doing pretty much just that for all of the advisors. Is coordinating calendars. So she's in charge of scheduling appointments. Time zones, it's definitely some days it's really crazy when you're trying to figure out where you're going to be and the calendar is showing it in one zone. So we have a person who's responsible for that, but we do use online scheduling calendars. That's definitely helpful. And because I know, for example, I'll speak for myself, but because I know what my schedule is going to be like. So I know that I'm going to the East Coast on these dates. And here's my schedule. And then so she just goes and books all appointments for those 3 or 4 or 5 days that I'm there. So I try not to have virtual meetings during those days because I want to have the openings for in person. But if it needs to be, it could be. I do a lot of evening appointments. It's just works out that way. I'm not sure. We've always been flexible as far as I don't have a 9 to 5 schedule. I never have. Weekends, I would work on a Saturday. Actually, it's my favorite day to work because it's quiet. You can get
it is. No one emails you back, which is beautiful.
Right. Oh my gosh, I can get a lot of work done. But sometimes I would see a client, right? If it's worth my time, I could see a client on a Saturday because during the day everybody works. So and being on the West Coast allows me to do late meetings for clients on the East Coast, right? Because I'm still like 4 or 5 o'clock my time. It's already evening their time. They're happy because they can meet with me outside of work hours. They don't have to take time off from work.
Great point. Yeah, no, it's a very complex structure, but I understand it, especially as so much of of search traffic is locally based. And so it is a huge advantage to be able to have, just offices in various places that folks are able to see that office, to find it. And again, you sort of worked backwards. Normally you hire the advisors and build around them. It's kind of cool that like you built the offices, let them build up, and now you can more confidently go hire a New York-based advisor or an advisor that's willing to move to New York to run that office because it's already established. You know it's going to work because it's already generating a lot of traffic, and they can just ramp it up from there, which is very cool.
Right. Like one of the latest states we had to register in because we had a client who was domiciled in that state, is Texas, right? So I don't have an office
there, and you get to register.
I know, right? We don't have an office just yet, but maybe it will come down the road. This is kind of how everything evolved with all of these locations. It was not, we never really had a plan like this. Okay, we can open an office here, here, here. It's just, it happened where the clients moved. It happened where the business was coming from. And so, yes, we kind of worked around building more on top of that.
Makes sense. So you've mentioned about hiring an operations person. So I guess what prompted you to start looking at operations? And I'll just sort of preempt this by saying, I recognize how difficult hiring operations is because they're not revenue producing. It's really easy to hire an advisor because they cost you $60,000, they bring in $100,000, and I can make those numbers work all day. But when you hire an operations person, which sometimes they're paid very handsomely, especially if they're very experienced, they're coming in and they're costing you a lot of money. They're not producing revenue directly, but can be critical for the success of the business. So I guess how did you make the decision that your business was ready to invest in professional operations, sort of professional management at this point?
Right. So I think I can attribute that a lot to how I have grown and transformed, right, over the last 3.5 years since I sort of took over. A lot of it had to do that I finally realized what I was good at, right, and what kind of skills I had and what I actually was enjoying doing, right? At the beginning, when I got a hold of the business, everything was excited, right? I was excited to do payroll. I never done books. We always had a bookkeeper, but other things in the background, compliance. It was awesome. It was fun. I was really loving it. But after a while, and I think maybe I just got more busier with seeing more clients, a lot of those things just started to get to me. And so at some point I have a big vision for the company and how I want to grow it. And so I thought that if I'm going to be involved in doing all of these tasks and seeing clients, who's going to work on more business development? Who's going to go work on promoting the company? So I started seeing sort of the spots that were weak and where I was not spending a lot of time. And I finally said, okay, the operations is something that I can hire somebody to do. And there are people who love doing it. They're trained, because I went to school and I learned how to be a CFP, right? I did not learn how to be an operations manager. Don't have an MBA. So I finally understood those differences, right? And one day I just said, that's it. I'm ready to hire an operations manager. And for me, it's definitely an investment at this point, but I was willing to take that step, right? Because I know that I can make more phone calls. I know I can reach out to more clients or more prospects, or I can go have more coffee appointments so that I can generate more revenue. And then the business could be managed by somebody else. I've also started a new service that I will talk a little bit more as well, that kind of prompted me to think that if I wanted to grow, and this is, I call it money at work. It's a financial wellness benefit. And so if I wanted to work on that and grow with that side of the business, I definitely couldn't be involved in the weeds, right? I had to be sort of thinking bigger and broader and being out there as a front person. So a lot of that and, kind of the goals that I had kind of led me to think that, okay, I want to have an operations manager. And I think I listened to a podcast, you interviewed JD Bruce about operations manager. So it was not that long ago. I think it was maybe 6 months ago. And yes. And so I finally said, I'm ready. I put out, a resume together, or not a resume, a job description. And this made all the things, a list of all the things I wanted him to do. And it was actually so funny how this turned out. I have a job description, right, for the admin person. You have a job description for what the advisor is going to do. And then all of a sudden I came up with the job description for the operations manager. And I was sitting in my office and thinking, okay, so if they're doing all of these jobs, what am I going to do? Right. Even though seriously, I was like, oh my God, it was awesome. At first, I'm like, well, now I've got to go out and get the business.
So and maybe if it's still posted, maybe we can link to the job description in our show notes, but give me sort of an overview of how you define operations, because I do think it can be different depending on the industry. So When we say operations manager, how do you see this person's role at the company?
So I outlined, I'm going to see if I can find this quickly on my computer, but I had to define sort of the 5 different areas that I had in the business that I was working on, right? One of them was definitely marketing, right? I wanted for somebody to help with that. Sales, compliance, HR and training. So all the hiring I had to do, I didn't want to do that anymore. And so the overall, the bookkeeping, I guess that would fall under sales. So I had 5 different areas that I identified, and I created a mind map, right? Before I even kind of just went into the details of defining what the role was going to be. I just what are the things that I'm working on the monthly basis, and what are some things that I have to do? And so I created a mind map that had all of these areas, and then it kind of helped me see and identify the tasks for these people, right? Or for this person once they're going to start working on these projects. And it was actually really helpful once Ryan got on board, used the same mind map saying, here's how our business is run. These are the different departments or areas that we need to focus on. And so we started the training that way, and then kind of progressed. And so that now, 90 days later, he kind of has a good idea, right, where we at. And it's been transformational just over the last 90 days. I can't speak enough of how it opened up a lot of maybe mind space for me more than anything, right? Knowing that here's somebody who now understands, right, what's going on and how things are, and has a different perspective. Because I think all advisors are going to be feeling this. So I'm still attached to this more emotionally than I need to be. And he's helping me separate from that, because some decisions are not going to be good decisions if there's the emotion component involved. But it's hard because it's like your baby, right? It's something that's, and I can't even imagine because I, haven't quite done that, but, I bought the business, right? And there's different benefits of doing that versus starting it from scratch, but it's probably just as difficult to let go when you start it from scratch as it is when you buy it, right? And there's a lot of pressure at that point, different kind of pressure.
Yeah, and sometimes we put expectations on ourselves on the things that, we feel like we should be doing. As business owners, we love to should on ourselves and believe that we must be able to do everything. But yeah, listeners have heard me say it time and time again that my quality of life greatly increased when we finally hired a COO. And we did it, actually about the same sort of employee number that you did. And, which a lot of folks said was too early. If you ask a business consultant or a coach, we did it way too early from just sort of your typical point. But I just finally was just like, I don't want to do these pieces. And what I realized was, or what I have come to realize was, it wasn't just handing off a task and letting someone else do it. It was handing off a task that I actually was not all that good at doing and handing it to someone who was much better than I am at doing it. And then watching them sort of thrive and watching just, I don't know. I sometimes you think of operations as like, oh, it's just a task to be done, but it's really not. It's some people's passion. And when they're great at it, it's so relieving to not have to be the one doing it. And again, to watch someone else who's way better at it do it.
I cannot agree more with that. And then when Ryan tells me, I still try to get my hands into some things. And when he says, this is not your job anymore, it's like, whoa, okay. Sure.
You shut up. This is my job.
I know, right? Just let go for real. So yeah.
So funny.
Yeah, it is. But it does take a little bit of time. And I can't say that 90 days into this, it is definitely was a big step. I just figured that if
will be a good one long term.
Right. If I don't do it now, then my capacity, I was at full capacity. I'm still at full capacity. It's not like whole lot of things changed, but I feel like I can do more, right? Because all of those things are off my shoulders, or as much as they can be right now. Even hiring, right? Like the hiring process, and it's always hiring. So he is dealing with that right now. All I have to do is show up for a final chat. Before I had to do everything: the job description, the posting, the Indeed, and the phone screen,
follow-ups. Oh yeah, 16 interviews, and yep, I I hear you. Well, and as we're sort of coming to a close, this has been just fascinating because you have such a unique business and just such an awesome career experience. So I guess just sort of in closing, if there's one piece of advice that you could go back and give yourself, maybe the Anna that was getting into financial planning, or maybe the one that was going to be buying the practice, there's one piece of advice that you wish you could go back and give, yourself back then, what do you think that thing would be?
Yeah, I would say that I should have done a lot. I should have taken sales jobs right out of college. And I had an opportunity, like I had interviewed with Ameriprise, and I could have stayed at Smith Barney, right, and be more in the sales roles. But I kind of figured, I want to do financial planning and I don't want to be selling product. But later on, I realized that those skills, right, those sales skills, being more comfortable in front of people earlier, right, I think would have gotten me a lot more success faster. And I know that a lot of advisors struggle with that, right? Because at the end of the day, the hardest thing to sell is yourself. And so gaining that confidence right away. And so to overcome all of that, I have to do a lot of personal development and, read books, attend seminars. So it's never ending process, but I wish I had done that sooner, because I saw how my husband blossomed when he went from being a CPA and he was thrown into a sales job selling commercial real estate. I mean, that's, you completely transform, but it's just, it gets you a lot faster in business, and particularly if you're a business owner, right? Financial planning or being a financial advisor is one side of the equation, but to be a business owner, and I believe that sales is like the lifeblood of the business. And if you're not good at that, maybe you can outsource and hire for that. But if you're in charge, I think that's one of the things you've got to do. And it's not necessarily picking up the phone and making calls. There's different ways, but still being a lot more open to that. So I wish I've done it right out of college, or even in college. I should have taken sales jobs, but I didn't. I ran away from them.
It reminds me of Robert Kiyosaki's Rich Dad, Poor Dad. And no matter what folks' opinion is of Robert, one of the things he talks about in there is that he took a job as a vacuum cleaner salesman back in the day to learn how to sell. And basically he had that job until he was number one salesman, and then he quit and then went on and did something else. And very few people, I am certainly not one of them, take the time to develop skills in that manner. But it is huge. You're right. You got to learn how to sell. We don't sell products. We sell services, which is way harder. We sell intangibles. We don't sell, necessarily real estate that you can go kick, or a vacuum cleaner that you can test. We sell this thing called living a great life. It's just so challenging, and you do need to be confident in the ability that you can pick up the phone and have that conversation. So
yes, and I've encountered more of that even now with launching the financial wellness component of our business, where I actually have to make cold calls, right? I have to pick up the phone and call a business owner, an HR, consultant or department, say, here is a service we're offering. And it's a lot different than calling a client. So yes, and I think this is something that it's not like you learn once, you have to stay current. It's like a CE credits. I think there should be CE credit for sales classes. So
totally agree. I love it. Well, Anna, thank you so much for taking the time to come on the show and chat with me today. Super valuable insights and lessons. So thank you.
Totally. Thank you so much, Alan.
Be sure to join our VIP community at xyplanningnetwork.com/VIP to hang out with other XYPN radio listeners, ask questions for future mailbag episodes with myself and Kitsis, and to finally find a community of like-minded financial advisors. Thanks so much for joining me today. We'll see you next time.
You're not alone, and you're not crazy. It's scary starting, building, and growing your own financial planning firm. And that's why we put together a free private community just for you, the Cutting Edge Financial Planner. Go to xyplanningnetwork.com/VIP or text XYPN Radio to 33344 and join a network of thousands ready to change the lives of Gen X and Gen Y clients.